And we continue to follow breaking news from Pearson Airport. This is where a plane has crashed. Here is a live look at the plane crash. This is still on the tarmac at Pearson Airport. The airport says the Delta jet inbound from Minneapolis crashed on landing, and paramedics say up to 8 people are hurt. Though the federal transport minister's office has confirmed there have been no fatalities. Planes are not taking off or landing at the moment. We will continue our coverage right now with CTV's aviation specialist, Phyl Durdey. Phyl, thanks a lot for taking time to speak with us. So just your initial reaction right now from looking at this plane upside down.
Hey, Bakari. Yeah, really bad incident. Thankfully, nobody was seriously hurt. There have been some 8 injuries reported, but they've accounted for all the passengers. The winds at the time were around 27 knots, gusting to 35 knots, a little bit of a crosswind. The runway conditions aren't that bad, so we're not exactly sure. Wind was probably, could have been a factor. Right now, all the aircraft that were inbound to Pearson are diverting. It looks like there was one aircraft that is just landed at Pearson, coming in from Ireland, and there is a Air France aircraft which is actually orbiting over Madoc, over by Campbellford, and they're just waiting to come into Toronto.
Okay, Phyl, let's talk about this plane. This is a regional jet. It's a CRJ 900. This plane was en route from Minneapolis. What can you tell us about this type of plane?
Well, it's a Canadian-built Canadian regional jet, right? Built by Bombardier. A very reliable airplane. A lot of in production. There's about 2,000, I think, that have been produced. And it's a great little regional aircraft.
Okay, so along those lines, Transport Minister Anita Anand says that all 80 aboard, they have been accounted for. What's the capacity of a plane like this?
They can hold about 90 passengers.
Okay, so not a full flight completely. We have to talk about this. This plane was 16 years old. Let's talk about the average age of flights that we are seeing in our airspace.
Yeah, that's 16 years old is relatively new aircraft. The aircraft can fly pretty well almost indefinitely, depending on the maintenance. As long as they're maintained well, to have a fly on an aircraft that's 30 years old right now is not out of the norm.
Okay, Phyl, I want to read a post that we have from Doug Ford. I'm relieved there are no casualties after the incident at Toronto Pearson. Provincial officials are in contact with the airport and local authorities and will provide any help that's needed. The fact that there have been no casualties, I need you to respond to that.
Well, that's great. It's a miracle that there was nobody seriously injured. There have been air ambulances that have been dispatched to the area and are probably taking some of the passengers to trauma centers.
Yeah, and speaking of the air ambulances, I want to read a statement that we got in from them. 3 air ambulance helicopters, 2 of our critical care land ambulances have been dispatched. This is from Orange. 1 pediatric patient is currently being transported to sick kids with critical injuries. 1 male patient in his 60s being transported to St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto with critical injuries. 1 female patient in her 40s being transported to Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center in Toronto with critical injuries. I want to get your take on these injuries with seeing this plane upside down.
Well, it's as I was saying earlier, one of the things that's vitally important is, the flight attendants always make sure that you're buckled in, you've got your seatbelt securely fastened for takeoff and landing, and you should always keep it on for the entire flight. Now, it's one of the things, too, is to go over those safety briefings properly, listen to the safety briefings, and go over the safety card that's in the seat pocket in the seat in front of you. That way, you know where the emergency exits are, and you can evacuate the aircraft if need be.
Okay, Phyl, also, we have to talk about the conditions. This plane came from Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's very, very cold there, very snowy, windy there as well. Similar conditions to here.
Right. But the thing is, pilots are trained to deal with these kind of conditions. They do simulator check rides every 6 months. So they're always practicing and they're always taking off and landing. They're not doing auto lands all the time. So, they're North American pilots are some of the best trained pilots in the world.
And let's talk about the response out here. Looking at the tarmac, we see a number of first responder vehicles. And with respect to this, also, let's talk about, the last big incident that was at Pearson, August of 2005. Air France Flight 358, it slid off the runway. Bad summer weather.
Yeah, well, that was the thing with that Air France flight. They landed about halfway down the runway, and they just ran out of real estate, as we say. And one of the expressions we use in the aviation industry, where they run out of runway, right? So they landed halfway down the runway. It took time for the reverse thrusters to be deployed, and by the time they were at the end of the runway, they were still doing 70 knots when they went down into the ravine.
Okay, and again, Phyl, I want to go back to the conditions that, this plane landed in, because this is not something that's unfamiliar to, the pilot and co-pilot of this plane, having taken off from Minneapolis-St. Paul.
Well, they would have had as they were coming down into the area, they would have turned on ATIS, the automatic information system, which gives them the weather, gives them the winds, the direction, the visibility, and it also gives them the runway conditions. So that way, before they even get into the controlled zone, like very close to when they're getting towards tower, they will have a full briefing on what we're going to do, how we're going to land, we're going to use max brakes. They're going to be going through every possibility. And so that when they do come down and they are in that critical phase of flight or the final approach, they know what to expect.
And along those lines, Phyl, we were just looking at footage of the plane flipped over, passengers seemingly walking from the aircraft. I don't think I've ever been on a flight where, the flight attendants or the pilot prepare you for what to do if the plane is upside down, how to exit, because we see the doors open right here. I don't see any slides or stairs.
Well, no, they won't have slides on this aircraft because it's so low to the ground. But one of the things is that you're never briefed for what to do with the aircraft is upside down. But the thing is that you should be listening to the safety briefing, so you do know where the emergency exits are, whether they're behind you or in front of you. So that way you can make an informed decision when you have to get out of the aircraft. And of course, always remember, you have to listen to the flight attendants. They've got your safety at heart.
Okay, and along those lines, Phyl, I think it's imperative to just kind of reassure the public in general in terms of flight safety, how safe aviation is, given the number of crashes that we've been hearing about lately.
The flights these days are so safe. I'm an aircraft mechanic. I'm also a pilot, and I'm an instructor. And that's all we talk about is how safe these and how well built these aircraft are. Right. So to get on an airplane tomorrow wouldn't be an issue for me.
And also just taking a closer look at this particular flight, Delta Flight 4819. Attempting to land on runway 23, the winds gusting up to 35 knots, which is about 65 kilometers. Again, what can you say about these conditions?
They're not out of the norm. Winter weather, we're all in North America. We deal with winter weather all the time. And so it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just a very windy day. It makes it challenging for the landing, and the pilots use all their skills to get the airplane down safely.
Okay, CTV's aviation specialist, Phyl Durdey. We will be speaking with you again shortly. But again, right around 2:45 this afternoon, that's when we first began receiving reports that this Delta Airlines regional jet from Minneapolis crashed at Pearson Airport.